Okay, hello everybody. Anthony Jacquin here, and I'm pleased to say once again, I'm here with Aaron Alexander. He wears a couple of different hats, he goes by a couple of different names, but Aaron is how I know him and got to know his work, so I'll be calling him Aaron Alexander today. Aaron worked for, I believe, a decade in youth work, mental health. Um, has a particular interest in youth mentoring and restorative justice. He's a writer, he's a consultant. He has lectured around the world on various topics, including perception, trauma, resiliency, wonder, and human connection, which is where we'll be going today. And Aaron also is a very notable contributor in the world of what I call mystery performance, which is a way of bringing together those who are into magic, entertaining through magic, um, mentalists, giving the impression of some real world skills and powers, and of course, hypnotists who bring what appears to be the real stuff, at least. So, Aaron's work in that area was a massive inspiration to me. I don't know how long ago now, maybe a decade. The years keep trickling by, and we have continued the conversation and have plans to collaborate later in the year. So, Aaron, how are you doing? How's things?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, it's an interesting time. It has actually been exactly 10 years, which
Wow,
is wild. Um, I that we yeah, we would have connected 2014.
wow.
Um, and I feel like I'm at the an interesting inflection point in life where a lot of threads are coming together,
Yeah,
and um, I'm excited to see where they go,
good
basically.
stuff. Good stuff. And I hear you've just finished a rather lengthy course of study and completed your thesis. So
Yep.
I guess that feels good. Have some headspace back and some time.
Yes. Yeah, so the headspace is slowly recovering. I wouldn't say it's back yet.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to ask you, half a dozen questions today, and
Sure.
we'll just see where we go. So, um, I believe you describe your work this way, but certainly when I'm trying to describe what you do, um, I I often find myself saying, "Well, it's not quite that. It kind of bridges this and
Yeah.
that together." So, it's sometimes described as bridging the gap between magic and reality. Can you elaborate a little on that and perhaps how you use elements of magic to enhance, I'll call it the audience, but whoever it is that you're
Yeah.
sharing the space with, their perception of of what's real and what's possible.
Yes. Um, there are a few different ways I could come at that, but I think the the kind of the crux of it is that I've kind of approached I started out studying social healing ritual and how people change psychologically in different social contexts,
Right.
things like pain management or just other alterations of perception that you see around the world. And in particular, I began studying kind of how these things that look like tricks among traditional healers might be ways of kind of astonishing people into perceiving the world differently.
Right.
And so when you talk about bridging the gap between, I don't know exactly what you said, reality and,
It's kind of bridging the gap between magic and reality, and I guess
yeah,
what I was hinting at is that um, your magic from the traditional perspective seems to be free of some of the deceptive
right.
devices and mechanics. It seems as close as we can get to the real stuff. I think that's
Yes.
partly why magicians and hypnotists love it so much. So I guess that's what I.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think so. Well put. And so I think that's kind of where I came from is not the idea that you're creating tricks or you're building illusions, but rather all around the world, people have found ways to alter perception, um, often for therapeutic purposes. And it makes sense when you think about humans as these social creatures that build realities together. And so what I'm calling magic sometimes, to me it's like it's real magic because it's you're not tricking people. You are legitimately doing exactly what you say you're doing. Um, but it works because we have this innate ability to co-construct reality. And in moments where we break an illusion of what the world is like and we see that there's greater possibility out there, that feels like magic.
Mhm.
So it's kind of real magic on both sense. You create something that looks and feels like magic, and it reminds us of the real truth that the world is bigger, and we flood with this sense of possibility, and because of that, we're open to new possibilities.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it. It resonates with me. Recently, I've been sharing this very simple line from a paper by a guy called Peter Lush, who kind of rallies even against using the word hypnosis and self hypnosis.
Yeah.
His view, and I think it's a very sound one, is that human beings have a natural freestanding
Yes.
ability to alter their experience,
Yes.
and it's just that culture gives it a certain wrapping or
Yes.
a permission to engage in this way. And I guess in the past, I missed the fact that calling something hypnosis or self hypnosis was another wrapper. I thought that was the final, most transparent and honest
Yes.
of them all. And it's like, actually, no, that's another cultural relic in a way that gives us permission to speak to parts of ourselves or suggest to someone that they can put something down or they can tap into a resource.
Yeah.
So it's kind of coming up in a clean and kind of very very honest way. Maybe I'm falling for the same thing again. I don't know, but
Yeah. Well, I hear you, and the science as I'm aware of it is that um these types of things, every culture finds some way of doing it, and every culture gives it a wrapper. Hypnosis is one that we're familiar with.
yeah,
And, one way to think of it is there's a lot of controversy. People, and there kind of shouldn't be, and I would argue in some cases, but there's a lot of controversy around like what is hypnosis, how does it work, all this kind of stuff. There isn't actually any controversy about the effects. You can see those effects going back thousands of years since recorded history. You can see them around the world. And not only that, but you know, you talk a little bit almost like falling for the rapper. I don't want to like overstate what you're saying, but it's kind of a trap of like this, there's something beyond.
yeah,
And I think both are true in that there is something beyond that's allowing us to wrap up something and get amazing effects.
hmm
And if you don't have a culturally consistent wrapper with which to communicate these possibilities to people, you can't. And
right,
so you sort of need both ends that we have this innate capacity to alter our states and alter each other's states.
yeah,
And it needs some mechanism for communication.
okay,
Hypnosis is one, but it's got a lot of baggage in this time and place. And so,
yeah.
that's where some of the nuance comes in.
Right. So, um, as well as your work and writing and study, you also perform now and again. You
Yeah.
get on stage, you do shows, and you're obviously very capable of creating moments of wonder in a kind of impromptu basis. I've been playing around with um, your last release with I took it to Brazil. I was doing a little bit of psychic surgery or whatever it is you call it,
Yeah.
which was kind of so good, such good fun.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, just to really get it working and like do it a few times over the course of a week in different environments. Really, really enjoyed it. So, um, let me ask you, how do you incorporate psychological principles into your performance? And I guess um, specifically to create this deeper connection, because
Yeah.
it seems to be a theme that comes up in your work of, not just holding a space, but
Yeah.
creating a space where something deeper is experienced, even if it isn't articulated, it's felt. and the person knows that it it was meaningful in
Yeah.
some way. So I don't know if you can share an example of just how you do that, how understanding psychology
Yeah.
enhances your performance.
Yeah, I mean, psychic surgery is an interesting example of that because it's one of these things where I try to package it up so you don't have to really understand what are the psychological principles to do it.
Yeah,
Um, and because the most important psychological principle is kind of what we already talked about, that we have an innate capacity to shift our experiences and to do it socially.
right.
And so that is a baseline that you can build off of. But you could also, so essentially for anyone who hasn't seen it, psychic surgery is this, it's almost like a magic trick, but not, where you're doing this mind body game and then suddenly people have in crazy experiences. And it's like very sudden. It's layered, so it seems like it just happens right away.
Yeah.
But when you look at how it's done, you're essentially engaging people in this like childlike act of play.
Okay.
And it brings them back to a place like they are a child, in a sense. It's just like that wonder, that curiosity, like, wow, could this be real?
And,
But
and
then
and
you
some of those
also,
lines,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt, are kind of part
yeah,
of your intro. I mean, I know it's very brief, but you'll actually say some of those things to them.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And because, um, I mean, first off, uh, counseling training, it's informed consent.
yeah,
But also you're letting people in so they're participating. Um,
yeah.
and when they can participate as their full self, you're going to get better results. Um, Also, play is a natural learning state. You can see examples like as you go through your developmental stages, the things you play with are things that are critical to your phase of development. And so play is kind of a natural state for trying on different realities. And so by inviting them into that, you create an open possibility without having to, seem like you're controlling or, be Mr. Hypnotist or any of that.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, we talk a lot about, people focus a lot about technique and doing things right. But in my mind, the more important principles are things like attunement and attachment. Do people feel safe experiencing something outside of their normal reality?
Hmm.
And so to do that, our states are contagious. Ideally, I feel that first. I can invite them into it. Ideally, I can watch for the cues of somebody who's a little bit hesitant and be able to understand and work with those. And so a lot of the psychological principles that I consider more important aren't things like suggestion exactly,
Hmm.
but more, yeah, like almost developmental psychology, attachment,
Yeah.
safety, social perception,
Yeah.
social
And
learning, that
it
kind of thing.
and if I remember correctly, there's a line that you use, I think reasonably early on. Can't quite remember the line now, but you're kind of warning them that this might hurt a bit, or
Right.
something along
Yes.
those lines. So it's like they feel safe enough, even though you're saying, this may feel a bit
Yes.
strange, or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you're running a roller coaster and you want, like, it can be really fun if you know you're not going to die.
Yeah,
But also, you need to know you're stepping on a roller coaster or you're going to think you're going to die. And so that there's that like delicate balance where
yeah.
if you say like this is totally safe and nothing interesting is going to happen, then you'll be right. So don't do that.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
Great. Um, Looking ahead, if that's possible, are
sure.
there any particular frontiers that you're looking to explore in your work? I don't know, particular themes. I don't know if it would make sense to consider technology, but things
Yeah.
that, you seem to kind of be on this cutting edge quite effortlessly, I must say. What is it that you're looking forward to, or the frontier you're
Yeah.
looking to explore?
Yeah. I mean, my first reaction is to the word effortlessly because it doesn't seem that way. Um, but when I think about it, it's because the big effort is seeing how much incredible potential is out there that we haven't quite tapped into, that the scientific evidence and the demands of our time and place in history are really calling for, and just like trying to keep all that in mind without going crazy and think like, okay, what are the places we can start? And
Yep.
so, you know, um, well, I guess one way to put it is at the start of the conversation, I said we can argue forever about hypnosis and what's happening and all that kind of
Yep.
stuff. We can't argue that these effects are consistent across time and place in
Hmm.
history and in human experience. And so what I've been really preoccupied with lately is different ways of bringing out those effects in, social, medical, psychotherapeutic contexts,
Yep.
that are highly efficient and highly scalable, and that don't have a lot of um, the trappings or baggage that
Okay.
that we typically have with mind body interventions. Um, and also, how can you bring those about when there's certain uh, systemic limitations in terms of like what people are ready to believe, what are their pathways to understanding that, oh yes, this is possible, financial incentives and structures and all that kind of stuff. And so I know that's super vague, but essentially out of this giant cloud of possibilities, I'm narrowing down a few high leverage places where we could say, well, if we could design an intervention that effortlessly does a thing, the same way you could get a result with hypnosis, but none of the rigmarole.
Yep.
Imagine how much you could accomplish if you were to plug it into this part of the healthcare system or this part of into psychotherapeutic practice. And um, and I'm working on that with a few very, very talented people.
Wonderful.
Um, and
But
it,
so
yeah,
so so
takes a,
without going into to all the details, these are the kind of
yeah,
things that could simply be delivered in words, perhaps in an interaction, in an
yeah,
intake, or as a procedure is being set
yeah,
up or delivered, that kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely. Or in place of a pill, or yeah, in any context, and the real effort comes not in that last bit where you get the wonderful thing, but in the bit where you uh create a space where people believe it can happen, but
Okay.
get yourself in the room. And so I have some good contacts for that, and it's a really interesting unfolding around. At first, I thought, wow, all these things are possible. Here's the experts I could think to, and now I'm kind of circling back, and I'm going like, actually, mystery performers are pretty good ones to talk to because they can talk about how do we open spaces for things that people don't expect to be possible.
Yep.
And
Great.
yeah,
Great. I love it.
yeah,
So not to drag you back into your thesis, but I know that one of the things you were studying toward the end there was common factors, and
yeah,
we had a brief chat, and you sent me down a rabbit hole for a day or so, diving
uh-huh.
into common factors because I think I only knew one or two. So for the for the for the purpose of the video, what are common factors in I guess a therapeutic context?
Yeah. Um, I mean, the first things first is common factors exist in any therapeutic context, whether it's medical, whether it's psychotherapeutic, it's universal. And one way to explain it is if you go to see a psychologist and they use cognitive behavioral therapy, say,
Hmm.
um, there are some things specific to that treatment where they give you some exercises on challenging your thoughts. You go off, you come back, you feel better, and so you say, well, I challenged my thoughts and I feel better, therefore that's what my improvement is responsible for. However, we also know that if you went to see a mindfulness coach and they're like, stop thinking about your thoughts, you'll be fine, and that
Yeah.
works, you also get better. And so the things that are specific to a technique or intervention, those are the specific factors.
Yep.
But there's also things that are there in both interactions, like your relationship with somebody who seems caring and knows what they're doing, things like the healing context and understanding what therapy is, in your culture. Like, Not every culture has therapy like we do. And so things that are universal to any intervention that works. And those are called the common factors because they're common to everything.
Right.
And what we found in the last few decades is that specific factors are actually not that important to change, or at least not in a measurable way, whereas common factors are. And it's very clear in the evidence. And it's a little counterintuitive because everyone has their modality, everyone has their technique, and we think that's what's doing the work. But it's almost like the pill, but the pill you're giving might not matter if you can't get someone to take the pill. It's all the other stuff that helps that pill, and the pill itself seems to be engaging people's natural healing capacity. So any route can bring you there.
Valuable stuff. And
Yeah.
so the couple that came to mind when we first spoke about it, I just thought of things like the therapeutic alliance,
Yeah.
which is really referring to the relationship, and it's
Yeah.
made up of other elements too, but trust and empathy. Um, would things like kind of client expectancy be
Yeah.
be a common factor?
Yeah. And so this is, an active area of research. So a lot of what I will say is somewhat generalities and things that still need to be studied.
Yep.
And it's also the fact that common factors gives a lot of really good handles and lenses to understand what's happening and why it's happening. But in psychological science, we don't have a degree of specificity that we can say a lot of things for sure. So it's almost like talking about germ theory before you have the best microscope. So
Okay.
with that caveat, I could say that yes, things like therapeutic alliance, expectation, all of those are part of common factors. There have been over the years many different people have come up with lists and categories and different ways of sorting factors.
Yeah.
Um, the two that are kind of biggest are Jerome Frank, who kind of came out in the 60s, 70s, 80s in kind of the era of big picture thinking, like Joseph Campbell and Mircea Eliade.
Right.
And he talks a lot about uh, persuasion, healing context, and like general principles. Whereas Bruce Wampold is the more modern guy he talks about healing pathways and how you can look at these and even factor analyze. So you can make a list of 20 common factors, but then when you run them through certain mathematical models, you can come down to a few. And
Okay.
so one of the pathways, he talks about three main pathways. One is the interpersonal relationship, being there with a caring person who seems competent and warm, that kind of thing. The other is expectation, which you mentioned. So the first one would like that's your therapeutic alliance. The next one would be, your placebo effects, your expectation effects, social learning, co-regulation, and then the third is specific factors, which is the thing you do. And these
Sure.
are all working in tandem.
Yeah.
If you have a specific factor, like here's a study or here's a technique, and you don't have a relationship, they won't do it, right? If you have a great relationship, but you're just sitting there, not very helpful. So these work together.
Yeah. And I, I'm sure there are some fledgling therapists who naturally show up with the common factors taken care of. But I think for many,
Yes.
the nature even of how we learn to do therapy,
Yes.
these things they may be given a tiny bit of lip service, but actually the
Yes.
focus is on specific factors. The focus is on technique, and you start to think,
Uh-huh.
oh, it's the technique that does it. I need to improve my technique, or I need to
Yes.
get a different version of the technique
Yes.
for this. And while competently and confidently delivering your technique is part of it,
Yes.
perhaps spending more time taking care of these common factors would make better therapists, I guess, and enhance your practice.
Well, yes. And I don't know how deep your rabbit hole went on those days where I sent you down it, but that is one of the interesting and kind of confronting things that common factors researchers have found is that our study into specific techniques seems not to have improved outcomes at all in the last 50 years, even though that's where most of the research and training goes.
Yep.
In fact, there's some really good evidence that more training might make you worse as a counselor.
Right.
That research also goes back nearly 50 years and it's been consistent this whole way through.
Hmm.
Um, Other things like experience. Some people get better, some get worse. On average, people, counselors and therapists will tend to be flatline or slightly
Right.
decrease. So it is a lot of it, kind of as you're pointing to, comes down to the things we think are important aren't. And by focusing on those for a long time with a lot of money and effort, we haven't improved much.
Yeah.
And yet, yes, things like these there are common trainable common factors, and the research on that is quite new. But they do talk about things like congruence and like facilitative
Sure.
interpersonal skills, like how people handle
Feedback,
conflict.
would be another one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, for
So
me, it helps. It helps me to understand why what you may have called traditional social healing rituals
yeah,
could be effective. Things that we might scoff at now,
yeah,
when actually what we're scoffing at are the specifics.
yes,
When it's more than
yes,
likely they had the common factors really locked down
yes,
in a good way. Your expectation would be high. The engagement, the support that
yes,
would have been around you would have been strong. So yeah, it helps make sense of Mesmer's success or
yes.
whoever else it may be.
Yeah, and that's a really, yeah, that's very well put. And I don't think I've put it together quite in those words before of like, yeah, when what matters is you have some kind of ritual that leverages common factors and like engages your natural healing capacity, and it fits your cultural context and understanding of what's wrong. And so if you go to a completely different culture, their healing rituals should look weird to you. And
Yeah,
we just look at a weird thing and we go, well, that's weird.
yeah,
Whereas those those processes that people have developed for their cultures, they may have been in the making for thousands of years. They're working on deeply evolved biological means that we have for self-correction and co-regulation. And it's like it's like thousands of years of tradition to make a thing that immediately changes people's results. You shouldn't dismiss it just because it looks weird, especially when our science is now telling us, in a sense, it ought to.
yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so um, we are plotting a special event to take place in Prague. Is it September or October?
I think it's mid-October.
I think it's mid-October. It got pushed back, didn't it?
Yeah.
So we've got a mutual friend in Manuel Luart, who is an exceptional mystery performer and really brings connection and charisma. And I don't know, it's just something about that guy. It's just it doesn't matter what he's doing, what he's revealing from someone's mind. It's just the way he does it, the experience he brings. So we're looking to, I guess, explore this beyond
Yeah.
via our personal reality, depths of human connection. There will, of course, be some performance, some transformative exercises. Can
Hmm.
you share a little bit about what you plan to bring to that event? Because we're of the view that it will be of interest, not just the therapist or performers, but
Yeah.
anyone who's in a position to communicate, to command and manage attention,
Yeah.
creatives as well. So, what will you bring? What will we take away?
I hope to bring a few things. What excites me about it is that we've been having conversations of kind of like when you step back from the frame of placebo, of hypnosis, of all the little boxes that we've made as a culture, what else is possible? And and that is a gigantic, exciting expanse. And we talked about an event where people could come and have some direct experiences of this possibility. And it comes through you as an expert in hypnosis and the beyond, because I know that box has not suited you for a long time, and yet you're very competent there and outside of it. Manuel is somebody who's incredibly able to connect and open possibilities and talk about sort of the social side of engagement, charisma, connection.
That's right.
Um, and I come in with an interesting background of I started from a science perspective studying social healing ritual, and I'm back there now 15 years later, and in the middle have seen the capacities of how to engage people through performing. And most of my talks were talks for scientists, talks for lay people on mental health,
Yeah.
um, showing just demonstrating mind body connections and that kind of stuff in a context where people can really experience it without all the preconceptions. And so what I'm hoping to bring in is some tangible tools and experiences that people can have to see some of that beyond, to see how easily and naturally we can connect when we create the right spaces for it. um how we seem to be evolved, designed to be able to do a thing socially, connect to modify each other's worlds in a healthy way, in a way that the dominant Western culture is not doing, even though our best science every single day tells us more and more that we can. And so, in my kind of intellectual side, it's this exciting moment where like, here's practice, here's evidence. Oh, this could be cool. And then on the other hand, being in a space with people who are really excited about possibilities and sharing some of those.
Yeah.
I will bring my possibilities. So will you. So will Manuel, and so will everyone else who comes.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm excited for.
Yeah, me too. There's going to be a great group there. Um, and let's face it, modifying someone's world is just so much healthier than just influence.
Yes.
You know, it's
Yes.
like let's modify this reality. And again, encourage self-expression
Yes.
via these means. Encourage people to create. From this place. Great. I'm excited about that. It will soon come around. I've never been to Prague either, but I have read a lot of Milan Kundera, and many of his books are set there. So I'm
They do have a great magic bar. Not to bring us back down to magic, but it's such a good vibe. So hopefully we'll get to spend a bit
great,
of
and we've
time
got a
there.
very special space. Took a while to find something suitable, but I'm really pleased and
Yes.
excited about it. Okay, well, look, I think we should leave it there. Thanks
Yeah.
for your time today, Aaron, and your thoughts as usual. I look forward to continuing the conversation another time.
All right. Until then.
Cheers.